Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining this session of Drupalcamp Ghent 2014. My name is Arne Vandenbussche. I am a project manager at CrossCheck, and the topic of my session is beacons and Drupal. Next to me is Algeron, one of the technical wizards behind what we will see today. This is actually the last presentation of this two-day seminar, so I'm happy that there are still some people attending this session. Thank you for that. I'll try to keep it brief, and also given the fact that we started a little bit later, we will go through it quite quickly. I'll try to explain the position and the vision of CrossCheck about what beacon technology means for developers today. Our experiences in these beacon projects has given us a couple of insights that we also like to share. And I'll illustrate the birth of something called Biggle in our company with a couple of real-life cases that we have built and that are actually live now. And finally, given the fact that this is the last presentation slot today, I'd like to invite the people who have questions to just join the roundtable discussion immediately after the session. So starting to work with beacons is actually easier than you might expect. The only thing you need are actually a decent set of brains and some common sense as a first thing. The second thing is some knowledge about the code and the behavior of the beacons, being the hardware. And of course, a good tool for your content management. And because content management is rooted deeply in the DNA of CrossCheck, let this presentation help you to get a head start. CrossCheck, formerly known as .project until mid-2013, is a Drupal-based website builder and a creator and integrator of custom software solutions based always on open source platforms. Always supporting and improving critical core business processes at the customer side. And next to that, of course, we support IT departments, communications, and marketing in optimizing the workflow and security questions. We are recognized by customers for simplifying simplifying complex business processes into easy to use CMSs. And because we strongly believe in open source, we really like the dynamics behind this, and that's also why we are presenting here. The baseline, as you can see, is strategic web technology. And that means that when beacons, when people started talking about beacons first, it was still a bit blurry for a lot of people where to go and what to do with it. And as Megamindi would say it, is it een vliegtuig, is it een vogel? We were not really aware of what it was, and we tried to grasp it as soon as possible. I guess that by now all people in the room do grasp the essence of what beacons do and what beacons are. But when myself, as a non-technical person, have to explain it to people in our network, I have actually three kinds of explanations. One for strategic people, one for, let's say, the code geeks, the webbies, just like you guys, and then for the technology people, which I see more as the IT people who are concerned about IT infrastructure and managing the hardware. On the strategic level, I always try to tell people like marketeers and communication managers that beacons allow them to create new interactions that are triggered by physical presence and not only location of a user, but really proximity. It's a proximity-based thing. And then they're always very happy because they say, yes, we can push coupons and price reductions to the consumer in the store. They are happy that they can sell. So we have let's say another reflex about that, but that means that we always have to manage the expectation of those people. Then when we talk to our rather web, let's say, target group, the coding geeks, just like you, I try to explain that we can build new ways of interaction with our web solution or our app, and that we can automatically make things happen. we can automate stuff, and then they're always very happy. Yes, we can build robots with beacons, and please can we have some time to play around with it. So also there we have to try to keep things in line and allocate the work that is done to a specific project. And then the people who are concerned about infrastructure and IT, to them we have the discussion of the Internet of Things, devices communicating with each other, of course. And they're always very happy that a lot of possibilities are open and that everything is actually still possible, also with beacons. We started focusing on beacons as of the second half of 2013, when Apple actually started really promoting to the market their beacon protocol, their iBeacon protocol. And our objective there was to establish internal knowledge database and also start working actually with the technology, because the earlier you're on it, the earlier, of course, you can do cool stuff on the market. Also within the company of CrossCheck, there are skeptic people and there are believers. The skeptics are always naturally forced to look at the dark side of things. There's always something difficult or something tricky, or the technology perhaps is not yet stable and it's going to be difficult. Whereas the believers and the dreamers, they say, let's do fun stuff with this. Let's build a cool tool to bring it out to the market. But in the history of Dot projects and CrossCheck, we came to know actually that the reality is somewhere in between those two points of views, and that's why we started actually doing stuff with it to see where we would end up. I think it's okay for you guys that I skipped the basics of what a beacon is, because I think everybody is well aware. So let me quickly skip this one. These are a couple of images of beacons, not the typical contact or ST modes, but the radius ones. When a user with an application that is talking to beacons is out of the reach of an application, we can't talk to that person with the beacon. I will use one example here that explains a scenario. It's a very simple scenario. It's for once, it's not a scenario in retail. It's actually a scenario from a museum. Imagine you've got the application of a museum or of an umbrella organization of museums installed on your mobile phone. You are out of reach, so that means that nothing will happen on your screen. But when you are approaching, so you are within the reach of the beacon device, your phone receives the iBeacon trigger as a command to show you a specific message from the database, from the application. In this case, we can see that the museum is actually sending out a call to action for people to come inside the museum. The attention of the user of the application here is drawn to the entrance of a tour. When you're closer, beacons have the ability to give a different signal related to, let me rephrase that, sorry, a different message related to the distance you have to the beacon. So context-wise, that is very interesting to, a very interesting thing to work with, because you can actually improve your communication there. And then when people are inside the museum, for example, they are right in front of a painting, then you can have the in-application experience that is also triggered with a beacon next to or behind or whatever, really close to the painting. And there you can go much further with your in-app experience. So this is just one tiny, very simple idea of a use case scenario where beacon-triggered content can add value for the interested end user. Remember, the end user is interested. He opted in by installing your application. So that also is kind of a tricky part when you're talking about beacons. You really have to promote your application, because otherwise things will get difficult to reach a big crowd. And in a couple of minutes, I'll provide a brief overview of 3 of the projects that we have established recently. Why do you have to start thinking about and why do you have to start working with beacons today as a developer? Because one of the most important reasons, I think, is that application users nowadays really demand service-oriented communication, contextual information that is important for them and that is relevant. And beacons are, of course, a big help there. There's also a big buzz about beacons throughout several company departments, and that means that for us as developing companies, it's interesting to, let's say, get held up in that discussion and advise and give consultancy to people, give advice to companies. Because we see that a lot of companies are trying to make sense of it all, and they don't really seem to do that in a very strategical way. Some people at IT are playing around with beacons, some people at marketing, and then some people on point of sales, for example. But they don't really organize their work. So there is an important role for developers, actually, because you're behind the code and behind the buttons, and you can actually really help out with that. The second last point here on the screen is about data and analytics behind the beacon signals and beacon use, because it allows us as development companies to also provide information and reporting about how people interact with beacon triggered content in a specific context. And this is all, let's say, added value about the behavior of the potential customer or about the customer. And this, of course, helps to draft a future of communication and selling, which is really interesting, of course. Then as a last point, the number of beacons that actually is being used in an active way is projected by Fosbury to be around 4.5 million beacons by the end of the year 2018 worldwide. Of course, this is just one of the numbers. You can read many online, but since given the fact that Fosbury is very relevant in this case, I took this one. The earlier actually you start making sense of it all for yourself, the earlier you will be writing stronger code and stronger projects for your customers. So we'd like to share also our point of view from CrossCheck, which we call the 4 elements. Because we believe that for a good scenario, for a good project, you always need to have 4 key aspects that need to be fine-tuned and to be put together in order to work well. The scenario for a use case needs to be really user-centered concept. You need relevant triggers at the relevant time. Relevant content needs to be pushed to the user, and also once that he's drawn, that his attention is drawn to your application with a beacon, you need to give him relevant user actions and relevant application, actually. So that's really important to always understand the user intention. It also relates to what I told you guys earlier, because if you will always start to push coupons, for example, to people through the same application, we strongly believe that your application will have a short lifetime on that specific phone. So you always have to think about a real added value experience with a beacon. The second point is the hardware setup and the connectivity. It's actually the hardware component of the project, which is still, I think, a struggle for a lot of companies. Battery, power management, durable materials for your beacons. If they are custom made, they have to be protected against rain, against wind, against vandalism, against developers walking around in the streets. So that's really important also to have a good hardware setup there. The front-end application, it's not what we as CrossCheck focus on, but you always have to know or have to let's say the architecture of what your end user has in his hands needs to be really nice. And then, of course, the fourth part is what we focus on as a CMS builder, is actually the content management for the beacon program, let's say. And this is really the core of our expertise, and that is why we came up with Biggle. It's actually a combination, of course, of the word beacons and Drupal. So we even have our own logo. And let me quickly explain to you what Biggle is. Biggle is actually a beacon content management system. So it is not an application for a mobile device, but it's really a CMS to manage the content that you want to show when a specific beacon triggers a specific action, actually. It's a centralized beacon content management system that is really interesting because physically the beacon setup is, let's say, distant. It's scattered all over a location or a setting or even several shops, for example. So actually the communication manager is allowed to work in Biggle to manage the content that is shown at the several locations. Currently in Biggle we have two content types. We have beacon and the beacon data node, and it also allows through a simple form to set and manage the lock screen message, which is the message that you see when your app is open in the background, and the beacon signal triggers a lock screen message from your application. And you can also easily manage the front-end content that you want to show in the application. At this moment, the content types that we have are still really basic, but we are actually developing Biggle from one proof of concept to another. So we're actually incrementing and improving these content types. Important to know is that you can have really granular communication, enabling sophisticated messaging schemes, like the simple one that we showed you earlier in this presentation. Hello, welcome inside, start the tour, for example, when you're distant, closer, and very near to something. And Biggle allows you to build, or to start building actually, a pluggable and an expandable CMS for beacon content management. Let me take you through 3 of the cases that we are happy to present to you. The first one is related to the commemorating events of World War I. In the city of Crosstrack wanted to show tourists and inhabitants what the city had to endure during the Grote Oorlog. So they came up with a touristic tour where 22 information panels placed throughout the city were to inform people. Every information panel had a strong story about the role of Crosstrack and the happenings with Kortrijkzanen during World War I. We have actually enabled these points of interest with beacons and published a small iOS application alongside with it. And this application can be installed and by people taking the tour when they take the tour. The app actually draws the attention of the user when the person doing the tour is near one of those information panels, one of those points of interest, but actually warns them up front that they are close to a point of interest, even when they are, let's say, not really doing the tour. People can use it complementary, for example, while shopping or while cycling through Kortrijk or walking through the city, even though when they're not really doing the tour, but just the application is running in the background, they will be warned as well, and that gives an interesting, that's an interesting user experience. So not only the extra content that we show in the app compared to the information panel is interesting, but also the fact that you can allow people not to do a linear route. You don't have to go from point of interest 1 to point of interest 2, but you just can really cruise the city and you will be informed by the application. we also have a website where the application is available. It's not rocket science, but it's really cool to do it actually. These are a couple of pictures. At the back of the picture, you can see the information panel that we custom made together with the people at Buddha in Crosstrack. And yeah, you just see a couple of mobile devices and the plan of the city, actually, on which you can also see the locations where the information panels are set. This is a concept drawing of one of the beacons that is, let's say, hidden in the information panel. This is the message that people receive on their iOS device when they are near an information panel. And then this is a screenshot from within the application. Actually, this is the list overview of several points of interest. If you are near a point of interest, you click the lock screen message, you are immediately shown to the detail page of this one, where we give, for example, a gallery of images, and in the near future we might also have extra material to be presented there. A second case, where we actually started to expand the functionality of Biggle, was a case that we have done for Premedia, which is the internal communications agency at the Colruyt Group. The app is used by the innovation department as a beacon evangelist proof of concept, actually. So the innovation manager takes this concept and takes this application to the several brand managers of the several seniors in the group. For example, Colruyt, Bioplanet, Dream Baby, they're all actually playing around with this application to see how it could add value in the store or otherwise. So it's kind of internal roadshow from innovation to the brands. Actually, the app allows to manage 5 beacons for every office environment of the several, let's say, shopping brands of Colruyt. The colleagues at those offices that have installed the application, they get contextual information about the location where they are in their office. For example, if they are near the canteen at noon, they will get a message about the lunch, and they will have some really extra content that is not just shown on a poster or something. They will really try to tell people, hey, buy something in the shop, then buy something in the canteen, mix those two together, and you will have a very special dessert today, which no one else will have. So they're really trying to play, they're trying to do cool things with the environment there. Also, household rules are being pushed to the colleagues at Premedia and at the several brands. For example, if somebody is walking away from the printer, he might receive a message, hey, have you checked if there's still paper left for the next one that would like to print something? So they're actually really trying to make sense of it with this application in the office environment. Also news about parking, meeting rooms, etc. Clean desk policy, it's actually communicated through this application with 5 beacons. This is a screenshot of how they do it, and this is, for example, it's actually the same format of the application that we've used for Crosstrack, but here they play around differently with the images, which gives another feeling and another, it looks like another application actually. Then a very interesting one, which is still kind of new, is actually our internal CrossCheck application, which we made for our colleagues. It's interesting because it's, let's say, it provides practical information with a pinch of Big Brother attitude, because it allows, for example, to share information about meeting rooms, booking statuses, but also give some news about lunch, welcome message to customers, etc. But, and this is very interesting, it can also check if you leave the office if your timesheets, for example, are completed for that day. So we've used the API of Jira to do the necessary checks, and it seems to be working fine, so that's really nice. It can also check if the daily debrief is done. The developers actually have to tell project managers where they're at which task they finished their day, and if this is not done, the application actually will warn the developer when he's leaving the office that he still should do that to finish off his day. Another funny thing that we have integrated there is the Jira closer of the day ticket, which is actually just taking a look into your oldest tickets in Jira, and when you leave the office, it actually, no, it's not when you leave the office, it's when you push the button, it hints you one ticket that you should close or that you should finish during the day, because it's, let's say, an old ticket that is still waiting. A couple of screenshots. For example, time to empty the dishwasher. It's also a cool one, an interesting one. Here is a summary of Jira tickets, for example, and the button for the closer of the day ticket. And this screen then allows the user to, for example, allow or not allow the timesheet alert. I think most people will actually disable this one, but we have to do that because it's really user-centric. That's what we try to explain also. A little bit more technical information on Biggle. It's a Drupal 7 based set of modules that actually will help you to get started quite fast with Beacon content management. It is pluggable into your existing Drupal setups. And again, as I told you earlier, we have two content types, the beacon and the beacon data. The beacon data identifies the beacons and references to the correct, let's say, content to show the correct node or the correct content in the application. Here you can see both the beacon and beacon data content type. In this screen we have a list of the beacon content that we want to show finally in the application when it's triggered. And the next screenshot shows us, let's say, the managing dashboard of the beacon hardware, where we can identify one beacon and where we can tell him what to link to. And then within the content, let's say, that we want to show, you have the notification that you can easily fill out. This is the, I've also noted it on the slide, it's actually the lock screen message that you want to show when people, when the application is triggered. Then there's the form for your content type. And another interesting thing is that we allow people working with Biggle to actually set up a time schedule to show specific content at specific time. So you can, for example, a beacon that is at the entrance of a shop, when the shop is closed, you can show different content easily than when the shop is open. Small summary. Biggle makes it easy for you to allow the administrator of your CMS to easily manage beacon triggered messaging in his application. So our message here is really to get your head start now and play around with what we have built so far. Given the fact that we as an open source development company want to contribute this to the community, we have put this available on GitHub, and that means that you can start using Biggle to get your head around this beacon opportunity and actually don't have to start coding from scratch in your CMS. So you can profit from this work that we have done and try to have a quick go-to-market of your project. We would like to get the pulse going in GitHub, so we'd like to hear from the community also if there is possible improvements, questions, technical stuff, anything is more than welcome. We are eager to share also our knowledge that we've built up during several projects. So let's have the discussion and talk to each other. Thank you very much for your attention. See you in a couple of years at Drupalcamp.